Hi everyone, welcome to Maths and Science in Your Pocket. Please make sure to like and subscribe. Let's have a look here at May 2023 Grade 12 Maths Paper 1, Question 1. So the first thing that we're kicking off with here is a trinomial. So we would need to solve x, and for us to be able to do that, we need to factorize. So in order to factorize that, we look at the products for our 7 and the 12 there. So here I would have x minus 4 and x minus 3. Just a quick tip, if we look at our negative, if I have a negative first, a negative times a positive gives me a negative. This indicates that I would have both brackets there negative values. So that's just a quick tip to make sure that you're correct there. So therefore the final answer here is then going to be x equals 4 or x equals 3. So those are the two solutions that I have for this function. Remember, this is a parabola. A parabola will always have two solutions unless it is undefined and I find it above my x-axis. But for this function, it cuts my x-axis twice, therefore I have two solutions for that function. Now again here I'm working with a quadratic function, just a little bit decomposed, so I would have to restructure it. And a key thing here to note is that they tell me that this is then going to be, or I would need to answer this correctly to 2 decimal places. So that indicates that I would need to go and use the quadratic formula. And the quadratic formula is, if you can remember, is x is equal to negative b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. So you need to remember that equation in order to answer this question. So before we can use that equation, we need to distribute and rearrange our function a bit. So let's continue. So here I would distribute my x into my brackets there. So I would have 3x squared plus 5x minus 1 equals 0. So you would see I already brought 1 to the left hand side, making it negative. So all I would need to do now is substitute into my quadratic equation. So this means I would have then an answer there of negative 5 plus minus the square root of 5 squared minus 4. My a value is 3, so I'm multiplying by 3, and by negative 1 for my c value. And that is then divided by 2 times my a value, which is 3. So that we simply type into our calculator. So here I will find that x is equal to 0,18 or x is equal to negative 1,85. So again, I have a parabola. If my x values will have 2 solutions there because of the quadratic function. So the next question, I'm working again with a quadratic, but now it's a quadratic inequality. Now I want to know, where will my function be greater or smaller or equal to? In this case, smaller than. But it might change depending on whether or not we multiply. Let's have a look. So I will rearrange this so that all my values are on the left hand side. So I have x squared is plus 2x minus 15 must be smaller than 0. Just a quick hint, if I'm going to multiply or divide with a negative, then this sign will change direction. So then it will change to a greater than. So again, you can always wait till the end of the video and then get access to that PDF with the additional notes. So please make sure that you like and subscribe to gain access to that. But let's continue with it. So here I have then a quadratic function or quadratic inequality that I need now to factorize. So if I factorize this, I have, in this question, I have x minus 3 and x plus 5, which must be smaller than 0. So in my function, x will be equal to 3 and x will be equal to -5. So let's have a look at how that would be represented on my function. So if I have my function value here, and I have a parabola, and that parabola is then represented, first of all, my negative will be on the left-hand side because that's a smaller value. I have the -5 and then the 3 as the root. So now I want to know where will the values be smaller than 0. So we must know that anything above my x-axis, so this is my x-axis, will be positive for my y values, and anything below my x-axis will be negative for my y values. And I want to know where will my y values be negative. So if I have a look at the function will always be negative below the x-axis, so therefore I'm looking at this part here specifically. So the answer finally will then be everything in between x equal to 3 and x equal to -5. So therefore x will need to be smaller than 3 but greater than -5. So everything in between, which I highlighted there in pink for you. So that is the key thing when answering this question. We need to know where will the value be smaller or greater than 0, or sometimes even equal to. The next question, 1.1.4, we are looking at a square root. When we look at a square root, we need to get rid of that square root by squaring both sides of the function. So if I square both sides of the function, so I have 2 and then 1 minus x squared equals x minus 1 squared. So what I do on the left-hand side, I have to do on the right-hand side. Something to note is that, remember that when I square this, this immediately becomes a trinomial. So be careful not to just distribute your squared to your x and to the 1. So that's important there. So if I then take the root and the square, that cancels, so I'm left with 2, 1 minus x on the left-hand side. And then my trinomial will then become x squared minus 2x plus 1. So let's quickly distribute on the left-hand side. So I have 2 minus 2x equals x squared minus 2x plus 1. Interestingly enough, we can now see that I have a -2x here and a -2x on the right-hand side, which means that allows me to cancel out these values, because if I take the -2x across, it will become positive, and -2x plus 2x is 0. So now I can bring everything to the left-hand side, and I will be left with x squared minus 1 will be equal to 0. And now we need to note that this is going to be a difference of squares. So it will then ultimately be x plus 1 and x minus 1 equaling to 0. So again, 2 roots, so x is then going to be equal to -1, or x is equal to 1. The key with this is I would need to go and test my answer. So to test my answer, and I'll do that in green for you here on the side, is I would need to go and set these things still equal by substituting in the negative value. Let's substitute in the negative value first. So when I substitute in the negative value, I have 2, 1 minus 1, and that is equal to -1 minus 1. So immediately I can see that this is -2, and 1 minus -1 is then going to be, that will give me an answer there of 1 plus 1, which is then going to be 2. So that means I have the square root of 4. So in this case, you will see that here the answer is then going to be 2 equals -2, which is not true. So therefore, I can conclude that this one is not true or invalid. So x must be equal to -1. Whereas if I substitute in 1, 1 minus 1 is 0. On both sides, 0 equals 0. So therefore, 1 is in fact true. Okay, so the key thing is we need to indicate which one is not going to work. So let's have a look at question 1.2. 1.2 is interesting because now it requires us to first employ some exponential law. So when we look at the first side, I'm going to say 3x plus y equals 3 cubed, because 3 cubed is equal to 27. This allows me to see that both my 3's are the same, or my bases are the same. So therefore, I can drop the bases and x plus y will equal to 3. So now I can make x the subject, so y is equal to 3 minus x. This will now become equation 1, and the one that I haven't worked on yet will become equation 2. So all I'll do now is I'll say substitute 1 into 2. So if I do that, I have x squared plus 3 minus x squared equals 70. Important to remember is that we can't just distribute or put the square there. That will be wrong. But what we need to note is that this is a trinomial. So I will be left with x squared plus 9 minus 6x plus x squared equals 17. Now this allows me now to maybe factorize to see what all my answer is going to be. So I will be left with 2x squared. I'm going to bring everything to the left hand side and simplify. So I'll be left with 2x squared minus 6x minus 8, because I brought my 17 across. So therefore I will have 9 minus 17, which is equal to negative 8. And the whole function is now equal to 0. Because I can see that 2, 6, and 8 all have the factor of 2, I can divide by 2 straight through. So I will be left with x squared minus 3x minus 4 equals 0. And all I have to do now is factorize to solve the equation. So I will have x minus 4 and x plus 1 equals to 0. So x is equal to 4 or x is equal to negative 1. Because I have my squares here in my equation and in equation 2, I can conclude that when x is 4, y will be equal to negative 1. And when x is negative 1, y will be equal to 4, because that will then result in an answer of 16 for each. So ultimately, I need to solve the answer for both these equations. So that's important. That is the final answer for this question. Again, please make sure you consult my PDF for alternate methods. Like and subscribe just so you can be updated with anything that changes. 1.3, the final question of this question paper. Let's have a look here. So here we are given an irrational series with our first term, and they give us our last term. So we need to find out what is the value of this series. In order to determine that, we first need to go and rationalize all of these values. So because all of them are irrational, so to rationalize, I will start by saying 1 over root 1 plus root 2, and I will multiply with the conjugate of that. So root 1 minus root 2 divided by root 1 minus root 2. So the key here is to note that I am technically, for this part here, I'm technically multiplying with the number 1. Because if I divide the 2, I will have 1. So I'm not really changing the equation, I'm just rationalizing it, manipulating it so that it becomes rational. So, and I'll do that for the second and third term, or second term there as well. So I have 1 over root 2 plus root 3 times root 2 minus root 3, root 2 minus root 3. And let's go to the last term of this function. So I have root of 99 plus root 100. Remember, root 100 is 10. So I'll multiply that with root 99 minus root 100. And then the same thing at the bottom, square root 99 minus the square root of 100. Now the key thing here is to realize that I'm working here with the difference of squares. So now the answer simply will be root 1 minus root 2 divided by 1 minus 2. So because I'm working with a difference of squares, that is what the answer will give me. Plus root 2 minus root 3 divided by 2 minus 3. Plus, and now I can go to the last term of the sequence, that would give me root 99 minus the root of 100 divided by 99 minus 100. And now I want you to see here is that here I'm working with a denominator which would be equal to -1 for each one. So the final answer, or not the final answer yet, but finally I would be able to conclude that because I have the -1, this would technically be negative root 1 plus root 2 minus root 2 plus root 3. And now I can start focusing on what would have been here in the middle. And I'll just do it for one more term. I would have negative root 3 plus root 4. And then it would be negative root 4 plus root 5 and so on, all the way to root 100. So if I continue to the end of my sequence, I would be left with negative root 99 minus plus root 100. So now you will note that I can cancel out plus 2 negative root 2, plus root 3 minus root 3, and so on. So plus 4 and a negative 99 will cancel, and I will only be left with my first and last term. So I will only be left with root of -1 and root 100. So root -1 plus root 100 is -1 plus 10, which is then going to be, this must be just root of 1, is -1 plus 10, which then gives me a final answer of 9. And that would be the final answer. So the important part for this question is to note that I would need to rationalize and then only solve my function and see the pattern, and only add my first and my last term accurately. So stay tuned for the next episode. Like and subscribe. We will be looking at question 2, which will then focus on where do sequences and series converge? What is the next term? Where are we going to look at arithmetic and geometric sequences? Sum to infinity, sigma notation. So please stay tuned, like and subscribe so you can see when that next video drops. Enjoy your day. Until next time.